Our next speaker will present updates about the mysterious, unidentified lights, beams, and craft seen by at least 30 military men that fateful last week of December 1980. She will be joined by one of these eyewitnesses who's gone on to actively engage the research of the events and other witnesses there at that time. He was an Airman First Class assigned to RAF Bentwaters police duty in December of 1980. This speaker is one of the leading researchers and journalists in the world, dealing with the UFO ET phenomena for over 20 years and almost needs no introduction. A graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communications, she has devoted her documentary film, television, radio, writing, and reporting career to productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment, and received local, national, and international awards, including, but not limited to, 3 regional Emmys, a national Emmy nomination, and a Station Peabody Award for medical programming. Her documentaries have included Poison in the Wind and A Sun-Kissed Poison, which compared smog pollution in Los Angeles and Denver, Fire in the Water, about hydrogen as an alternative energy source to fossil fuels, A Radioactive Water, about uranium contamination in public drinking water in a Denver suburb, A Prairie Dawn, about astronaut training in Denver, and the documentaries that launched her into the UFO ET issue, A Strange Harvest and Strange Harvests, 1993, which explored the worldwide animal mutilation mystery that has haunted the United States and other countries since the 1960s and continues to this day. Linda Moulton Howe has also produced documentaries in Ethiopia and Mexico for UNICEF about child survival efforts, and for Turner Broadcasting in Atlanta about environmental challenges. And of course, last night, here at the X Conference 2010, she received the PRG Award for this year for Courage in Journalism. Please welcome Linda Moulton Howe and later John Burroughs to X Conference 2010.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the award last night. I wonder how many of you here are deeply aware of the details of RAF Bentwaters. But in terms of a lot of research, you're not deeply aware. Well, I'm going to start with just setting the stage geographically a little bit in history, and then we're going to go deeper and deeper into some of the military voices from that time who have, in some cases, emerged only recently, and in one case, 2 cases, 2 men have said to me that I am the only reporter that they have talked with in 30 years, and that they were never debriefed once, no matter what they were doing at RAF Bentwaters, and that becomes a theme that you will know is sort of a large box of this incredible phenomena that you're going to see unfolding, that all of the men who were there in one night, there may have been at least 35 out in the forest with Colonel Halt. And yet, in terms of what we would expect on a major air base in December 1980 that was joint between the United States and the United Kingdom, there was only a policy of denial. It didn't happen. And yet all of those men and women, a few women were there, and you will hear from one today. They knew that they were not seeing a lighthouse or Mars or Venus or anything that was spread out into the media later on, as this could not be what people were saying. And from an investigative reporter's point of view, I personally think in many ways that RAF Bentwaters has the potential to be a leverage point that is greater than Roswell. So as we begin, I'm going to take you first, where is this place? It's northeast of London, where the coast faces the North Sea, or it's in Suffolk County, And the towns that are around there are Woodbridge and Butley and Ipswich and Orford Ness. And in 1942, the British Royal Air Force constructed an airbase between Buckley and Tunstall, which is the large pink circle near the top of the map, on the northeastern edge of Rendlesham Forest, and they called it RAF Butley. That was about 4 miles northeast of RAF Woodbridge, and that is the large pink circle on the left. More trees were planted to enlarge Rendlesham Forest to help cover up World War II military activities. So it was very important to what was happening in England during World War II. To the south was the RAF Bodsey Chain Home Radar Station, the bottom pink circle on the map, that during World War II monitored the launch of V-2 rockets from Germany. Although there was no defense against the German V-2 rockets, RAF Bodsey was able to provide the British Bomber Command with the location of the German V-2 launch sites, and then they could be attacked. East of Butley, at Orford Ness, which is the far right pink circle, that's where that famous lighthouse is, was an experimental Madre over-the-horizon radar station that was constructed in 1961 to monitor Soviet launches. After the end of World War II, RAF Butley was renamed RAF Bentwaters by Britain's Ministry of Defense and leased to the United States Air Force for its 81st Fighter Interceptor Wing and the 67th Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Squadron. By 1958, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge became a joint U.S. Air Force and Royal Air Force complex. They were together with the big, thick Rendlesham Forest in between. In 1992, after the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Cold War thawed, the United States canceled its involvement with RAF Bentwaters. That is now a privately owned business park, while RAF Woodbridge is used by the UK Ministry of Defense for Army training exercises. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on the highly strange events that took place over 3 nights and days from midnight of December 26, 1980, to sunup December 28, 1980. And this Google aerial shows the Woodbridge weapons storage area in the lower left near the Woodbridge runway, bordered by dark green Rendlesham Forest. And at the far eastern end of the Woodbridge flight line is the famous East Gate. Beyond the gate is a British civilian's farmhouse called the Foley House. And the orange path marks the roads that Staff Sergeant James Peniston said that he traveled in a security pickup with Airman First Class John Burroughs and Airman Ed Kavansak to investigate strange, unidentified aerial lights on what would have been the time frame of after midnight on December 26th. In your mind, just make a little clock. It helps to follow this story, because in the civilian world, we are used to thinking of only one night in each day. It's when we get home from work and the sun goes down. But in military operations that are going 24/7, 365, there are 2 nights. 1 and midnight shifts. So December 25th at Christmas is when Sea Flight, in which John Burroughs and Ed Kavansak and Jim Peniston came on at 11 p.m. on Christmas night. The clock switches at midnight, and now we're into December 26th, and the first of the most dramatic events that unfold. That orange dot on the map, right here, that is the area that Sergeant Peniston says that he and Airman Burroughs approached bright lights and a black, glassy surfaced, triangular-shaped craft. Between the Foley House and the farmhouse is the section of Rendlesham Forest where the mysterious lights, beams, and at least one craft phenomenon is described by many people and occurred between December 26 to 28, 1980 and a piece of this story that many of you may never have heard about before, what happened 2 weeks later on January 9th, 1981, back in the same Eastgate section of Rendlesham Forest. About 4 miles north was the RAF Bentwaters weapons storage area that did have nuclear weapons. That was a top secret at the time. There are men today who will still not say, yes, I know that there were nuclear weapons stored there, but there are others who admit it, and it is now accepted that RAF Bentwaters, under some agreement that we do not know the paper trail on that to this day, where were the agreements made between the United Kingdom and the United States that allowed the United States to have nuclear weapons stored on the RAF Bentwaters side of this huge joint base that played such a major role in NATO at the time in in 1980. Now those nuke bunkers were in an area that they called Hot Row, and they were watched 24 hours a day by security from the Bentwaters WSA watchtower. This photograph from the now historic RAF Bentwaters Tower looking out over the nuclear weapons storage area was taken in 2007 by UK police officer Gary Heseltine, or Teen, who will be talking later. This Google aerial shows the RAF Woodbridge Eastgate is about 6 miles west of the Orford Ness Lighthouse. And keep that in mind for any of the history or newspapers that you've ever heard or TV programs that dismissed what happened at RAF Bentwaters as nothing but a lighthouse. Now, what I have come to better understand is how many highly strange aerial light phenomena were being seen by various people in different parts of this large airbase, but sightings were often not reported. If reports were made, they were often known only to the people involved. As RAF Bentwaters Airman First Class Doc Rhodes told me, quote, "When I got to Bentwaters, fresh from basic in January of 1980, I was told by some of the more experienced guys, if you see a light or something strange floating in the skies, don't report it. You'll only make trouble for yourself," close quote. And in fact, Doc Rhodes recently sketched for me what he remembered seeing at the beginning of 1980. This is almost an entire year before the events that we're going to go more deeply into. And he was stationed as a young airman at the Woodbridge main gate one night, and he said this very large aerial light, completely silent, stopped in the air without right outside of where he was at the Woodbridge main gate, and it shot for a half hour a series of beams that came out of the big light, and the direction that they were going was the Woodbridge weapons storage area and that flight line. But Doc Rhodes said that he never reported that incredible aerial light and those beams because of the warning, don't stir up trouble. But this means that at RAF Bentwaters, from the beginning of 1980, that this is the kind of phenomena that was being seen, at least by Doc Rhodes, and reported in terms of rumors by others. And then we're going to go to the end of the year for what unfolded Christmas week. This Airman First Class Doc Rhodes, he was in what is called Delta or D flight at RAF Bentwaters. There were Alpha and Baker, Charlie, and Delta flights for law enforcement and security. Security would patrol base perimeters and flight line operations, while law enforcement would check buildings, deal with domestic disputes, and check people in and out of gates. Back in late December 1980, nearly a year after Airman Rhodes watched that big light emit that series of beams, military, security, and law enforcement from C and D flights are the ones that were involved in at least 3 consecutive nights of mysterious, unidentified lights, beams, and craft, beginning with C flight on the change from Christmas night to the early morning hours after midnight on the 26th. And one of those airmen from Sea Flight Law Enforcement was John Burroughs, said by some witnesses to have either jumped up onto a craft in the forest or rose up in a beam of light. I heard that rumor back in the early 80s that a man named John Burroughs may have been taken by whatever came into Rendlesham Forest. John's conscious memory has been blocked for 30 years about all of the details of what happened to him on two different nights, after midnight the 26th and after midnight the 28th, 1980. But 8 years after 1980, something occurred which gives us today like a historical insight into John Burroughs' blocked mind. And it was brought about by a Hollywood TV producer who was responsible for a 1988 program that some of you might have seen. It was called UFOs Cover Up Live. The producer was named Kurt Brubaker. Now, oddly, there was none of John in UFO Cover Up Live, even though Brubaker touched a little bit on R.A.F. Bentwaters as well as many other subjects. But after the broadcast, Kurt Brubaker organized, with the help of some other people, a hypnosis session, and John went to Kurt Brubaker's home on November 11th, 1988, and met with a hypnotherapist named Al Ward. There was Kurt Brubaker's wife was there. John Burroughs was married at the time, and his wife was there. So there were the three men and the two women, and those were the five in the room when, for the very first time, somebody attempted to penetrate John's blocked memory. And what I'm going to show you, because I think it is important for you to get a feeling of what came out of this blocked mind under this first hypnosis session with John, 8 years after all of the phenomena in the forest, and then we will go further into the details and the military voices. And I want to explain that this was originally on magnetic tape. And over time, for those of you who have been experiencers with magnetic tape, you know it deteriorates. So you will see the classic deterioration of rainbows, but it does not take away at all from being able to hear a remarkable, as if John was provoked some way. He could not remember this consciously. But now I'm going to play for you what happened in his mind that day that has never been in public. You are seeing this as an audience with the Eureka Springs audience in April for the very first time.
We started getting nervous. We were like going, what are we getting into? I don't know. What's going on? We don't know. The radio keeps coming back. They can't reach us for a while. We can't reach them. We're getting real nervous. We're getting scared. We can't get on the radio. We can't go much farther if they don't hear us on the radio no more because we don't like what's going on. Sergeant Pennison, what do you think? I don't know. Stop right now. Stop right now. Let's try to reach him on the radio. Okay, we've got him. Yeah, it's still there. It seems to be in the clearing. It seems to be in that clearing up ahead. Can we go on farther? Yes, go on farther. Find out what's going on. Let's go, guys. Look at that. There it is. Hit the ground. I run. I die. Shoot, John, shoot. I can't. I don't have my gun.
Who's telling you to shoot?
Sergeant Pennison. I don't have my gun. They told me not to bring it. Yes, they did. They told you at the last minute to bring it.
Describe what it is he wants you to shoot at.
Lights. A weird oval-shaped light. It's hovering. It's strobing.
Flashing back and forth, flashing on and off?
It's white, but but there's lights below it. There's little lights below it. There's the orange lights. There's the red lights. It's like sun. It's like the sun, but it's not shaped like the sun. It's like an oval shaped thing, and it's pulsating. It's pulsating.
How far away is it?
10 feet, maybe 15.
How big is it?
I don't know. It keeps changing. It keeps changing.
Changing
It's
its size.
the lights are pulsating. It's hard to judge. It's hard to judge. It's there. It's there now. It's moving back. It's moving back. It's moving back.
Away from you?
It's moving away. It's moving. It's up. It's up in the air. It's up in the air.
How
It's
high?
moving back. It's moving back. It's up through the trees. It's moving back. It's moving back. Now it's in the distance, but it's there. It's down low again. How did it get through the trees? I don't know. I don't know. Well, we'll follow it. Call him. Tell him. We're going to follow it. We got to follow it. I can't reach him on the radio. The hell with the radio. Put it down. We don't need it. Put it in your hose. Put it in your pocket. Let's go. Let's go. We don't care what they say. We've got to find out. Something's there. We got to find out. Let's go. Spread out more. Okay, let's go. Okay, move. Okay, be careful. I feel weird. I feel tingly. I feel tingly. We all feel tingly. We all got to know. We got to know. Is it a UFO, John? I don't know. What is the UFO? What is it? I don't know. It's not real. It's lights. It's not an object. It does not appear to be a solid, total object. It just appears like it could be an object because it gives the impression of an object, but it's mostly lights. It's all lights. It seems like lights to me.
A shape made of light.
Yes, a shape made of lights. It's getting smaller. It's small. Look how small it got. Look how small it is. I don't believe it. Look how small it is. It's just there, though. It's like it's calling to us to come to it. We've got to go to it. It's telling us to come to it. We can feel it. Yes, can you feel it? Yes, I can feel it. We've got to get to it. We've got to know what it wants. It wants us. Let's go. Spread out. We're getting into some more woods again. How could it move? How could it move through the woods? How could it move through the woods like that? There's no way. There is no way nothing can move through the woods like that. There is absolutely no way. There's no trees being knocked out. There's no trees being knocked down, but it's in the woods. Look at this. It's in the woods. It's moving up and down. Look at this. Sergeant Pennison, should we keep going? Yes, we should. I agree. Are you okay over there? Yeah, I'm fine, but this is weird. I know it's weird. I've never seen anything like this. Look around. Can you see any other crafts? Can you see anything else? Can you see somebody that might be out here doing this to us? Can you see anybody? It's quiet. It's all quiet now. There's nothing there but this thing. It's pulsating. There's red lights. There's blue lights. There's orange lights. It's there. It's small, though. It's real small. It's small. Keep going. We can hear humming now. The ground's shaking. This is weird. Why didn't we bring our guns? Could it be drawn to us? I feel like I'm being pulled. Something's pulling me. Oh, God. Sergeant Pennison, what's going on? I don't know. It's pulling it towards us. Oh, look, it just changed again. It's small. Now it's moving back. Look, it just, look how fast it moved back. Look, it's a quarter mile back now. Let's start running. We can't let it get away from us. We got to know where it is. Okay, well, it's gone. Okay, security control, return to base. ETA back, I don't know. 30 minutes, hour, unknown. Okay, keeping radio contact. Okay, and we just start walking back. And I'm talking to him.
Who's going with you?
I'm talking. Sergeant Pennison and I and Banachek. We're walking. And we're walking back. Okay, what was it? I don't know. John, what do you think it is? I don't know. Do I look scared? You look pale. I don't know what I saw, John. I think it was a UFO. I don't know. I don't want to believe what I saw. He goes, John, it seemed like we were there and all of a sudden we're here. Why couldn't we get radio contact with them? We should have been able to. There was repeater stations, there was towers, but we lost contact with them. I don't know. Well, what are we going to do? I don't know. Let's just see what happens when we get back. So we're walking, and it's cold, and we're walking, and we come across a creek that we don't even remember crossing. Do you remember this, John? No, I don't remember this. Do you remember that, John? No, I don't remember that. Well, how did we get there? I don't know. Could we have been moved by it? Could something have picked us off the ground? I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, let's get back. Okay, now the radio transmissions are getting strong now. Real strong.
We hear.
Okay, we're talking real clearly with them, and they're saying, what's your ETA? We don't know, we don't know. The British police are there, the shift commander's there, the flight chief of security flight chief's there, our flight chief's there, there's other law enforcement patrols there. Everybody was concerned. They go, we've lost contact with you for 45 minutes, 50 minutes. We didn't know where you were. We saw, the WSA tower saw all kinds of lights in the air. They thought they saw something being beamed up in the air, but they weren't sure. They thought, we lost you, John. We thought we lost you guys. Well, what happened? We don't know. I had a feeling of disbelief. I didn't know what happened. I wanted to make sure, in my mind, that there had to be physical proof out there where the site was to make me believe what I saw. So I went out there with the rest of them. And when we got there, there was the Sergeant Gulius, a Captain Verano, and some other guys out there that I don't know who they were. And we were asked to show what happened. And we went out kind of in the area where we first found this thing. And God darn it, there were tripods. There were 3 evenly spaced impressions in the ground, right where we saw this light. And I'm like, holy Jesus. And we're all looking at each other, and we're going, maybe we're not weirdos. Maybe something really did happen out there. So then we went, and there were tree limbs down. There was fresh tree limbs down. And there was some damage to the trees. And by then I'm like going, oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to myself. It's hard to tell something had happened. Oh God, I wish we could have recorded this. I wish we would have had more than just what we were there. I do too, John. We just experienced something probably that a lot of people never have and never will.
We just experienced something that a lot of people never have and never will. And after that, John Burroughs and Jim Peniston returned to their Sea Flight shift commander, Lieutenant Fred Boran, who asked them to describe what happened. And Sergeant Peniston called the lighted object in the forest, quote, a craft of unknown origin, close quote. After debriefing, John Burroughs returned to his rented room in Ipswich to get some sleep during the day of December 26th. John woke up in the early morning of December 27th feeling like something had returned. Burroughs was told that D-Flight Shift Commander Bonnie Tamplin was driving in her Jeep when a blue light stopped the vehicle and entered the window, and that when the blue light moved inside of her Jeep and back out, the blue light scared Lieutenant Tamplin so much that she cried on her communications over the radio, and she was relieved of her duty. So even though John Burroughs in Sea Flight was off duty, he decided to return to Rendlesham Forest. He met Doc Rhodes at the D-Flight guard mount for the midnight shift into December 28th and got a ride to join Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt, who had organized a team of men and equipment to investigate the Rendlesham lights. Now finally, this is the night after midnight, December 28th, when there were at least 30-some men out in the forest. Colonel Halt is there. There are light-alls, Geiger counter. There's a lot of equipment and trucks. And now we're picking back up with one more short segment from the 1988 hypnosis session, which is the first time that John Burroughs, at least in his subconscious mind, remembered some details about what happened.
Colonel Halt, I go to Colonel Halt. It's back again, I can't believe it. He acted like he wasn't surprised. He was real calm. But the other people were scared. They looked weird. They looked very surprised and very, very upset. Colonel Halt and I were standing there, and Arnold and I were standing there, and he was good friends with Colonel Halt. Well, what happened, Colonel? Weird thing. He goes, weird things, Chris. He goes, we had things over on top of. They were making contact with their mind. And I looked at him, what are you talking about? Started little blue lights. And I go, I didn't see little blue lights the night before like that. He goes, well, they're out there. And he goes, the craft was still hovering out there. He goes, they're coming from that craft. They've been out there for hours. And I go, well, I want to get closer. And he says, okay. He goes, you can come with me, but Chris, I want you, Solomon, to stay here. Hit the light off at the truck. And he goes, John, I want you to go out there because I think you can bring this closer. What do you mean?
Who told you that?
Colonel Hall. I think you can bring this ship and these things closer. They want you to do it. And I'm like,
Who wants you to do it?
Colonel Hall?
Colonel Hall said they did. That's all he said was they.
Does he appear to have some knowledge or some understanding that you don't understand?
I didn't understand what was going on.
Did you seem to know something that you didn't?
He seemed to be very at peace of mind and very calm, and like he goes, this is the most bizarrest, weirdest experience. People will never believe it.
Do you know why they thought you could bring it closer?
No, I didn't understand. And that was something that I never understood either. They wanted me there, and they wanted me there in stages. Like, you could stay in this area for a while. They weren't surprised that I was there either. They were not surprised. The people that saw me come out there were surprised, but Colonel Halt was not surprised. And they kept me in stages. They kept me waiting, like, wait him here, wait him there, and now it's okay.
What happened then?
Well, then he put his arm around me and he said, let's go. And then there was all of a sudden there was this short, fat buck sergeant, and he was Mexican. And he was there. He appeared coming up, like coming towards me. Like he wasn't with the main group. He was like coming up towards me. And he says, let's go. And three of us walked towards the crowd. And Colonel Hall goes, I've got all this on tape recording. And he shows me the tape recording. And he has a radio with him too, his radio. And he goes, and I'm recording all this through the Wing Command Post. He goes, I'm going to keep all this stuff because it's going to be worth something. And he goes, let's go. So we started walking. And the light was there, and it was in the distance. And we walked a little bit farther. And then, there it was. 3 blue lights. He goes, there they are. I go, yeah, there they are. And he goes, that's what we had before. And he goes, John, he goes, you're never going to believe this, but there are a group of us, they made contact with us, they were on top of us, it was like they spoke to us. I go, they, what's they? And he goes, these lights. I go, you mean you saw something? He goes, these lights. He goes, there were lights there, and they were speaking to us, they were over us, they were flying in the sky, they were hovering over us, they were doing all kinds of things.
Now, John, hold it right there where you can see those blue lights. Now, I want you to look at one of those lights and ask the question that comes to your mind. And that light will talk back to you. Tell me what it says.
Come to me.
Okay, now, what'd you do?
They started moving, and we all froze. And they were up and down.
You mean the lights?
Yeah,
Okay,
they split up.
Okay, now ask them what they represent. Ask that light what it's representing.
The craft.
Okay. Now, is there any life form in or with that craft?
That was a life form.
The craft, the light, is the life form. The blue lights are the ones that he was identifying as being telepathic, putting information into their minds. And the short, fat Mexican is Adrian Bustinza, who was a sergeant and played a very interesting role on that particular night. This is the night of the 28th, this audio. Now, what I'm going to do is go back to after midnight, the 26th. You have now had an exposure through John Burroughs' mind back in 1988, 8 years after these events. And we're in 2010, and he still doesn't consciously remember what happened to him, even with other people saying that light beams came over him. But what we're going to do now is go back through what was the hard data that we all have as bricks in the foundation of this story. And let's start with the midnight after midnight, December 26th. This is the night that John Burroughs and Sergeant Peniston and Ed Kvansak have gone out into Rendlesham Forest to try to find out first what are these odd lights. That was the first audio. And later on, Airman Burroughs submitted a handwritten statement about what he saw to the RAF Bentwater's Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. And here is an excerpt. This is John's handwriting. It was handwritten on January 2nd, 1981, about the December 26th after midnight event. The lights were red and blue, the red one above the blue one, and they were floating on and off. Because I never saw anything like that coming from the woods before, we decided to drive down and see what it was. We went down Eastgate Road and took a right at the stop sign and drove down about 10 to 20 yards to where there is a logging road that goes into the forest. At the road, I could see a white light shining onto the trees, and I could still see the red and blue lights. This would move back and forth, up and down, but the blue and white and orange would come out. And when it was sitting in one place, blue lights would come out of the beam and the white lights below. Blue lights would blink on and off inside the beam, plus the beam would be red and orange. A white light would come out below the beam in the trees, signed Airman First Class John Burroughs, 81st Security Police Squadron, Security Police Operations, Charlie Flight. John worked with a man named John Rackham in England to try to flesh out in a computer illustration that you're looking at now from his January 2nd, 1981 illustration and notes. Those notes in the illustration are one of the bricks of what we would call the first pieces of documentation and paper trail that we have going all the way back to that time. Now, John Burroughs told me that he was overwhelmed with the feeling out there in the forest with Jim Peniston and Ed Kvansak that, quote, something was not right in the air. He and Steffens drove back to the East Gate. They phoned a Sergeant McCabe to report the strange lights, and McCabe alerted the Central Security Control. That early morning of December 26, 1980, Staff Sergeant James Peniston was duty supervisor at RAF Woodbridge. So Sergeant Peniston drove to the East Gate in a truck with newly assigned Airman First Class Edward Kvansak to see for himself what was happening. Jim Peniston said after a call to the shift commander's office, he was told to proceed off base. This is now going off the base onto civilian UK property toward the mysterious lights with the two other security policemen, John Burroughs and Ed Kvansak. The three American men were told to leave their weapons behind to comply with the British Military Status Forces Agreement. In that 88 hypnosis session, John is saying that Peniston's saying fire on it, and John is saying, I can't, I don't have my gun. Back in Sergeant Peniston's truck, the men drove out of the east gate and onto the logging road that ran through Rendlesham Forest, and Peniston said the road was so full of potholes that they stopped. And then Ed Kavansak walked with Sergeant Peniston and Airman Burroughs into the woods until a light rose in the above Rendlesham trees. And John says the light was suddenly so bright that it made them all hit the ground in a military trained reaction. Is this something that's going to explode? What is it? They all hit the ground. And whatever it was started moving back toward the open field. After that, there was a lot of radio interference, and it was decided, according to Sergeant Peniston, that Kavansak should stay with the truck to relay communications while Peniston and Burroughs continued walking toward the lights. And Peniston was responsible for guiding this orange path in this particular aerial of what the path was going out this. You can see where they stopped, the vehicle stop, and further on toward the farmer's field, that orange is the landing site that has been identified, at least for a long time, as related to the events on the 26th. John Burroughs and Sergeant Peniston also described feeling physically the hair on their arms and the back of their neck and their head stood up like a thunderstorm's electrostatic atmosphere. But it was a clear, cold night. There were no storms. According to Peniston's notebook shown here in his official written report, he and Airman John Burroughs got close to a highly strange craft on the ground. Peniston said, quote, triangular in shape, the top portion is producing mainly white light, which encompasses most of the upper section of the craft. A small amount of white light is appearing from what appears to be the bottom of the craft. At the left side is a bluish light, and on the other side is red light. The lights seem to be molded as part of the exterior of the structure that seemed to be landed on the forest floor, close quote. Strangely, John Burroughs to this day does not remember seeing Jim Peniston near such a craft. But Burroughs also knows that his mind is blocked when he thinks about the lights. John Burroughs also does not remember Sergeant Peniston having a camera, but Peniston says that he took 36 photographs on 35mm black and white film and sketched symbols in his notebook that were engraved into the craft's shiny black surface that he compared for me to onyx, black solid onyx. This computer graphic that was produced in the help of John Burroughs and UK researcher John Rackham, of what John does remember seeing in the forest is not an airplane crashing, it is not the planet Mars, and it is definitely not the Orford Ness Lighthouse. And what we know for certain is that the Sea Flight Shift Commander, Lieutenant Fred Moran, talked to Staff Sergeant James Peniston, Airman First Class John Burroughs, and Airman Ed Kavansak after the Sea Flight shift was over at 7 a.m. on December 26, 1980. And here is Lieutenant Moran's own summary statement. This was written on the date, you can see, January 2nd, 1981. Quote, at approximately 0300 hours, 26 December 1980, I was on duty at Building 679, Central Security Control, when I was notified that Airman First Class Burroughs had sighted some strange lights in the wooded area east of the runway at RAF Woodbridge. Shortly after this initial report, Airman First Class Burroughs was joined by Staff Sergeant Peniston and his rider, Airman Kavansak. Staff Sergeant Peniston also reported the strange lights. I directed Staff Sergeant Coffey, the on-duty security controller, to attempt to ascertain from Staff Sergeant Peniston whether or not the lights could be marker lights of some kind, to which Sergeant Peniston said that he had never seen lights of this color or nature in the area before. He described them as red, blue, white, and orange. Sergeant Peniston requested permission to investigate, After he had been joined by the security flight chief, Master Sergeant Chandler, and turned his weapon over to him, I directed them to go ahead. Sergeant Peniston had previously informed me that the lights appeared to be no further than 100 yards from the road east of the runway. I monitored their progress as they entered the wooded area. They appeared to get very close to the lights, and at one point, Sergeant Peniston stated that it was a definite mechanical object. Due to the colors they had reported, I alerted them to the fact that they may have been approaching a light aircraft crash scene. I directed Sergeant Coffey to check with the tower to see if they could throw some light on the subject, and they could not help. Sergeant Peniston reported getting near the object, and then all of a sudden said that they had gone past it and were looking at a marker beacon that was in the same general direction as the other lights. This could be the time that Jim Peniston tells me he knows that he lost at least 45 minutes in the forest. I asked him through Sergeant Coffey if he could have been mistaken, to which Peniston replied that had I seen the other lights, I would know the difference. Sergeant Peniston seemed somewhat agitated at this point. They continued to look further to no avail. At approximately 03:54 hours, I terminated the investigation and ordered all units back to their normal duties. I directed Sergeant Peniston to take notes of the incident when he came in that morning. After talking with him face to face concerning the incident, I am convinced that he saw something out of the realm of explanation for him at that time. I would like to state that Sergeant Peniston is a totally reliable and mature individual. He was not overly excited, nor do I think he is subject to overreaction or misinterpretation of circumstances. Later that morning, after conversing with Captain Mike Verano, the day shift commander, I discovered that there had been several other sightings. Any further developments I have no direct knowledge of. Signed, Fred A. Baran, 81st Security Police Squadron. Well, what exactly happened next, on what date and time, and in what sequence is still argued about by the people who were there. But for this presentation, I'm going to offer one possible sequence that's based on several interviews that I have done. At 11 p.m. on December 26, 1980, D-Flight was gathering to get their guns in the nightly procedure known as guard mount. One of the new enlistees who had only arrived at RAF Bantwaters 2 months before in October of 1980 was Lori Bowen, 18 years old, second from the right in the middle row of this D-Flight drill team photograph. Lori grew up in Fridley, Minnesota, and immediately after high school enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. Lori went through basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, and like all new basic airmen, she was assigned to gates to monitor people coming in and out of gates. Christmas night, December 25th, 1980, she had been at the Woodbridge main gate and remembers Base Commander Ted Conrad bringing Christmas dinner to her and others that were working the holiday swing shift. C-Flight was finishing its third midnight shift. That's where John Burroughs and Jim Peniston and Ed Kovansak. And that day of Christmas, D-Flight was on swing shift. That means during the day, beginning for 3 days on the 26th to the 28th, C-Flight, John Burroughs' flight, would be off. D-Flight begins 3 nights of midnight shift, starting at 11 o'clock on in this case, the 26th, and going till 7 a.m. the 27th, and they would do this for 3 nights. So we have left off C-Flight officially, and now we're into the world of D-Flight. And the amazing thing that I have learned is there was no communication whatsoever between the C-Flight and the D-Flight group. Those who came on in D-Flight knew nothing about what had happened in the forest on the 26th. Now, because Lori was a basic airman and she was not given the privilege of driving her own vehicle, Lori Bowen remembers that she's driven from the D-Flight guard mount and dropped off for a midnight shift at the East Gate, which would be after midnight, or that period as midnight goes over into the 27th. And this was not a normal procedure. Usually only swing shifts worked the remote East Gate and left the guard shack around 9 p.m. on those shifts. But the explanation for putting Lori there for the December 26th D-Flight midnight shift might have been precisely because of the Peniston-Burroughs-Cavansack dramatic events the night before. Lori said she and others in D-Flight were not told anything about the mysterious lights that C-Flight investigated, but apparently those lights and craft were being kept secret under orders from higher authority. And that same higher authority would want more eyes and ears on Rendlesham Forest in case those lights and a craft came back. And so now, Lori Bowen, 18 years old, is down here at the East Gate. She drew this, and you can see her down in the little, this was a little wooden 3-foot by 3-foot. Here she is. And she sees this big, huge thing. She compared it to a full moon come up. Here's the control tower. Here's the British Foley House. And 6 miles out here, this is the lighthouse. Thank you. I'm glad you're getting this. This is not this direction. And Lori is an artist by both love and now is becoming a professional illustrator. And she did this drawing to give me kind of an overview of the landscape. And she also drew a close-up of this red, orange, fiery light. And that you're going to hear her describe it in her own words as handfuls of colored fire.
If you took 3 handfuls of colored fire and put them together, and you saw one color, then you saw another color, then you saw another color, you get this feeling that it's not blinking, but that it's turning. And then this was in front of me on the other side of the runway in the woods. There's nothing but darkness from the trees. And it just slowly disappeared.
It went down from high on an angle into the trees.
Right. Just straight down into the horizon where the dark trees were. You could tell it was big, even though it's like looking at the moon. Is the moon big? You knew it was big because you could see it. You know, you knew it was off at a distance, and you're thinking, it's just like nothing else you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. You can't even compare it to something because there's nothing to compare it to.
Lori, what was the first thing that you did after seeing this bright orange light disappear into the forest?
I remember watching it, and then I remember the metal phone inside of that little wooden guard shack. You have to open up the metal lid on the wall. And I remember lifting it up and calling the desk sergeant saying, some big ball of fire or whatever. Somebody's going to come down to the East Gate. I don't want to be down here by myself. I just saw this huge ball of light just disappear into the forest. And then next thing I remember is Freeman Tozy being there. He would have been police 5. He came to my gate, and I remember we sat there listening to the radio, which is Motorola, as Lieutenant Tamplin, Bonnie Tamplin, talking to Sergeant Robert Ball, and I just remember the fear in her voice and her saying, Bob, where are you? I can't see anything. And she was scared to death, and she was just, Bob, where are you? I can't see anything. And she was so scared, and this was our lieutenant. And rumors that it was just a Orford lighthouse, which was ridiculous. Like I said, I lived in Orford at the time. And then they said it was Mars. What, do they think we're stupid? You know, obviously it was to shut us up and to cover it all up.
So Lori's sighting was north of the base, not east toward the Orford Lighthouse. Other people also saw different lights that night, including John Tremontosi and Police 5, law enforcement, along with 4 other men. Those 5 men watched colored lights in the sky and argued about whether the British were celebrating New Year's Eve early. Here is John Trementozzi.
We were doing security checks on the flight line, and we noticed lights in the sky.
And what colors were you seeing in the sky and what patterns?
The lights were red, green, and white. We notified the control tower. And what we seen was the lights were not blinking. There were just 3 steady lights. And they'd be in one spot, and then it would disappear, go to another spot, appear again, go to another spot, appear, and it wouldn't be any certain pattern that it would show up in. And no noise, and it wasn't stars. The white light wasn't flashing like it was a plane, and it was very weird. It was very weird. Matter of fact, we watched that probably for a good hour and a half.
So from somewhere around 2 to 3:30 a.m.?
Right. It was after Christmas, and one of the things we were wondering while we were watching this is England had a different New Year's than the Americans, because it was right around that time, which we ruled out after because it was just too strange.
Do you know any of the men who were with you that night that Colonel Halt was called?
I know the woman at the gate check was Lori Bowen. We notified our desk sergeant, who in turn notifies the sergeant on duty, the shift leader. And then security came out, the colonels were notified, Colonel Holt.
Meanwhile, after midnight on December 27, 1980, John Burroughs woke up agitated, thinking about what he and Jim Peniston encountered in the forest, and felt that the lights were back. Even though he was off duty, John went to Bentwater's Desk Sergeant O'Brien to ask what was happening and learned that D-Flight Shift Commander Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin had been relieved of her duty because a light entered her vehicle in the forest, causing Lieutenant Tamplin to panic and cry during her radio communications. The assumption is that Lieutenant Tamplin had gone into Rendlesham Forest with D-Flight Master Sergeant Robert Ball to investigate Lori Bowen's fiery sphere report. According to John Burroughs, even though his C flight was off duty December 27 to 28, when D flight was scheduled second midnight shift at 11, John Burroughs was there too. Filling in a few more facts from what he saw at the guard mount and his position at the East Gate that night is former Airman First Class Doc Rhodes. Doc and John Burroughs went through basic training together at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and they were good friends by December of 1980. Doc was surprised to see John Burroughs from Charlie Flight, along with several other C Flight people, show up at what should have been only a D Flight guard mount at 11 p.m. on December 27th. Doc went to Burroughs to ask what was going on. John told Doc he would explain more later about what happened to him, Peniston, and Ed Kovansak in the forest, but now John wanted to ride with Doc Rhodes in a patrol car to the East Gate because he wanted to get back into Rendlesham Forest.
And I got my patrol vehicle, and Burroughs rode along on patrol with me. That's when he explained to me about what they had seen. They seen a craft landing over in the Rendlesham Forest area, and they went out to investigate it, and there was something there that they couldn't understand what it was, and I think somebody touched it.
Jim Peniston touched it.
Okay. And then it moved away from them or something. You know, it was definitely something out there. And then I guess it was right around midnight, my flight chief, Sergeant Whitehead, called me and told me to proceed out to Woodbridge CSC. I think I left Burroughs at Woodbridge CSC because they were all getting their gear and stuff together to go out into the forest. I remember going out to the gate, and I was by myself, and in just a little bit, all of the trucks and vehicles came through. There were six-pack, which is six-passenger pickups with four-wheel drive, and a couple of three-pack police vehicles, pickup trucks, you know.
Were there any trucks that had light-alls in them that passed in front of you at the East Gate?
Oh, yeah. I think there were 2 or 3 pickups towing light-alls out to that site. everything that they took, they come right past me with it.
And what did you think about seeing light owls going out into the forest?
Well, I knew it had to be something going on because I had seen a lot of things floating around over there even before this incident even happened. So that was one of the reasons why I didn't go out there with them, because I was pretty sure that there was something out there. So I just decided I would sit there at the East Gate and see what was going on.
What did you hear on your radio?
Well, the main thing I can remember mostly was Burroughs kept saying, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" I remember that real well. And then I think Colonel Holt or somebody tried to get him to hush up, which they did, you know. This went on for a pretty good while. Then eventually the light owl units went out, and the radios were just almost useless, you know. And then I've seen 2, 3, maybe 4 objects that look like big Roman candles that they shoot into the air, you know, the fireworks. But these looked bigger, and they were reddish, bluish in color, you know, real pretty in color. They came up over the tree line and hesitated for a little bit, and then they just zoomed off into kind of like a northeast direction.
Then you knew they were not Roman candles.
Right, right. Burroughs talked to me after the shift was over.
What did he say?
That it left a tripod impression in the ground, and it split up into pieces, and those pieces moved around through the woods and everything, and I think they got a little disoriented while they were out there.
Now here is Sergeant Peniston's description of the craft that he says that he touched.
It was a triangular craft. The fabric of the craft was black like glass, and then throughout the fabric of the craft there was some coloring varying from saucer shape to pie shaped circles that moved around the craft. Some were red, blue, some yellow, or orange, I guess more orange. John is still with me, and I started taking observations in the notebook to coordinate the time I was there and what my actions were.
You are seeing what look like changing geometric patterns below the glass or above the glass?
Predominantly below the glass on the underside of the craft, and then occasionally moving around the upper side. It appeared that the coloring was part of the actual craft fabric. It made no sense. I've never seen anything that had that type of effect before.
Can you see through the black glass into the interior?
No, it was fully opaque. As we approached it, though, that's when I stepped off measurements of the craft. It measured approximately 9 feet long. That's 3 long steps with my stride, and approximately 6.5 feet tall. Occasionally, you would get some movement of color throughout the fabric of the craft. Sometimes a small blob that was probably 6 inches across, sometimes 12 inches across, but they were very sporadic color.
Circles that would change their size from something like 6 inches to maybe 12 inches when they moved over the surface of this dark black glass?
That is correct. It's hard to describe, but I think what stands out in my memory is the blackness of the craft. If you took an onyx stone and you had an onyx stone that measured 9 feet long and 6 feet high, that's what you would see.
Wow.
Yeah, to say the least. It was very unusual.
Were you thinking at that moment, this is not from Earth?
I knew that it was not from any form of government. I mean, no Air Force on Earth. It was beyond our capability.
Did you say to John Burroughs then, this looks like something from outer space?
I looked at John and I said, I don't know how in the hell we're going to explain this.
And do you remember what he said?
John says, we have a UFO here. I says, we have something here. I said, I got to have quiet here. I had already paced it off. This is my second or third time I was walking around it, mainly in awe. Toward one side of the craft, there was markings on the craft, which were very unusual, probably 2.5, 3 feet wide. I was looking for a crew compartment or a window or something. I touched it, and the air temperature out there at the time was probably I don't know, 34 degrees, something like that. It was very warm to the touch.
And you were feeling heat and what else?
Smoothness of the craft feels like glass, but it can't be glass. It's got to be metal, but it felt like glass. I was confused at that point because nothing in my training prepared me for what was going on. As I felt my way around the craft, I came upon the symbols that were on the craft and gave them a lot more attention, feeling each one, and then recording them in my notebook. If you had a sheet of smooth glass and you took a piece of sandpaper and you laid it on that glass, running from the glass to the sandpaper, that's how it felt.
Did you have anything come into your mind in terms of thought or image?
Well, did I feel an intelligence? Yes. But here's something that is odd. I lost track of John for like 45 minutes or so. I don't know where he was at. There was like a 45-minute gap of time there, which seemed like, I don't know, a couple minutes. I don't know what caused the distortion.
When is your very next memory of John Burroughs?
When the light on the craft started to generate to a more white, brilliant light, is when I backed away from the craft. John was maybe 15 feet away, 20 feet away, standing there.
Because you were afraid of what was happening with this increasing light?
I wasn't sure what it was going to do. I don't know, explode, or the craft lifted off the worst floor, went to treetop level, and took off at an extreme rate of speed, and nothing that I know of could be gone in a blink of an eye. I had this feeling, and the feeling was that there would be a return sometime of that craft. I don't know, it was just a very odd thought.
So that's December 26th after midnight. Now, before we go to John himself, let's listen to what Colonel Halt described about the beam of light that came down only a few feet from him.
The object stopped overhead and sent down a beam. The best way I can describe it is a laser beam, because the light did not radiate out like a normal light would do. It came straight down and fell at our feet, and we were quite concerned. The light was a very bright white light, probably 15, 20 inches in diameter when it hit the ground. It was right in front of us, less than 10 feet or 15 feet away.
What happened at that moment?
We stood there in awe, trying to, is it a signal? Is it a warning? Is it a method of communication? What do we do? And we just stood there for, 5, 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, and it was gone. I mean, it disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. It was so shocking that, wow. At the same time, we were picking up radio signals, continuously having problems with our radios on all 3 frequencies we were on from the weapons storage area, and they were indicating that they were over there. We could see objects in the sky over there. And I've later learned that there were some technicians from Communication Squadron working in the tower, as well as the tower operator, that observed some very strange things as far as lights and objects.
Do you know for a fact with your own eyes that you were seeing a beam come down in the general area of the weapons storage area?
I could see something, yes. There are multiple objects in the sky at that time, at least 4, if not 5 or more.
Were they all white?
No, they changed color. They changed shape from round to elliptical.
Colors?
Red, blue, and green, I think. Gosh, when the thing went overhead and the light approached us, stopped overhead, and it sent a beam down. Oh, my God, we all went into shock almost. How am I ever going to explain this? Nobody's going to believe this. This is a kiss of death for my career.
And he says that to this day. And now he's mentioned that WSA tower operator. And just recently I was able to talk with the man who was up there. He was in 50 feet up in the WSA tower, looking over where the big top secret of nuke weapons was. And he was Sergeant Rick Bobo. And Sergeant Bobo's priority was to report any threat to that WSA. He could call Broken Arrow, he could call Helping Hand, he could call anything. And if that occurred in an official way, it would have been an entire RAF Woodbridge Bantwaters event. Well, that night, he watched a large reddish-blue light in the sky that hovered stationary for nearly 2 hours. And he watched from this huge reddish-blue light that he compared to the size of a full moon, a little light come down out of it. And twice he called Central Security Control, and twice he is told it's being taken care of. Well, the being taken care of is apparently what he was also hearing on the radio, which was Colonel Halt and all of the men in Rendlesham Forest. But from Rick Bobo's point of view, this is one big thing, and it's near the WSA. What is it going to do, and why doesn't anybody come and deal with it there? Today, Rick Bobo is 52 years old and works in the Indiana Department of Transportation, the state in which he was born and raised. When Rick Bobo graduated from high school in 1975, there was a recession, jobs were scarce, and the next year he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. He was sent to Lackland, Texas for basic training and ended up at RAF Bentwaters in early 1980. Recently, I talked with Rick Bobo by phone about what he saw and heard during his D-Flight security shift in the Bentwaters WSA Tower on what we think must have been after midnight on December 28, 1980. Here is Rick Bobo.
It looked really big, and there was red and blue, and I did see something come down from it and went down into the woods.
Was the big light still up in the air and something went?
Oh, yes, yes.
So it's up in the air and something went from it down into Rendlesham Forest?
Yes.
Okay, and how long were you able to see that reddish blue large light?
Oh, goodness. It was there a long time.
Was there something about it that was highly strange in comparison to terrestrial lights?
It just sat there. It didn't go anywhere. It just sat in one spot. I think you could have put a crosshair on it and it never would have moved.
Wow.
Never wavered.
Well, Rick, did you ever see any beams of light come down from the bluish-red large light into either the Bentwaters weapons storage area, RAF Woodbridge weapons storage?
Nothing came into Bentwaters. All right, just so you know that. Nothing came into the Bentwaters storage area.
And why I'm asking about the beam down into the Bentwaters weapons storage area with nuclear weapons, Colonel Halt said that during that night, when they were in the forest, they had a beam come down very close to them, and he said it looked like in the distance, in the direction of the Bentwaters WSA, more beams were being shot down then as well.
Not into the WSA.
Okay. Well, that's an important piece.
I was in the tower. It didn't happen. It may have appeared so from where he was. I could see that. But nothing came in that WSA. Not unless it took all memory of it away from all of us that were in there.
I understand what you're saying.
Because it would not have been a small thing. It would have been a rather large thing to have happened. I did have some radio traffic that I could catch. I could hear them talking about things in the woods and, you know, lights in the woods and things bumping in the trees.
Do you think it was Colonel Halt's investigation?
It was somebody investigating. I couldn't tell you who was absolutely there. I believe Burroughs was out there at the time. I think they even had Geiger counters out there.
Well, it sounds that this occurred on the night that Colonel Halt and Monroe Nevels was there from Emergency Preparedness, and Lieutenant Bruce England from B Flight, and Sergeant Adrian Bastinza from D Flight. John Burroughs was there. A lot of people were there, and that sounds like this is the night that you saw this object.
Well, it probably was. And there was somebody that came up in my tower, but I don't know who he was. I don't know where he was from. I don't know what organization he was with. He came up looking through a scope. I didn't get to look at the scope. I don't know who he was or what department he was with. I could make an assumption, but it would just be an assumption.
What would your assumption be?
OSI.
Was he civilian or Air Force dressed?
No, he was military. I just don't know what department he was from.
Okay. What kind of scope was he looking at the red-blue light with?
It's like a spotting scope, which would have given very good magnification.
Did he make any comments to you?
No, we didn't speak.
Wow.
Well, he didn't speak.
You tried to speak.
I'm sure I tried to speak, but he didn't. Well, what do you do?
Well, did you try to explain to him that you had seen a light leave the big red-blue light and go down?
I'm sure I gave him every bit of information I had. Nobody else came up the tower. I had to let him up because I had my gate closed. Nobody could come up without me allowing it.
How long did he stay there?
15, 20 minutes maybe.
And when he left, he just left and didn't say anything to you?
He just left. Gone.
And no one ever debriefed you?
No one ever spoke to me. Matter of fact, nobody had ever contacted me after I got out of the service. Even the guys that seen it the same time I did. We never talked to each other.
Do you remember somebody telling you, don't talk about any of this?
No. Nobody talked to me about it. I'm telling you, nobody spoke to me about it at all.
Amazing.
Yeah. I thought it was a little odd, but, you know, when you're in the service, you just do what you're told.
And the absence of interaction with these people from C flight to D flight, no one talking with Rick Bobo, even though he had called Central Security Control twice on a huge object that was emitting light down into the forest, indicates that there was this effort. If you don't comment on it, it's not real. If you tell everybody it is a lighthouse in Mars, then that is what is supposed to make it go away. But John Burroughs is still haunted by what happened in the Rendlesham Forest, December 26th and December 28th, 1980. He is especially troubled by the fact that he cannot consciously remember what happened when he was close to the lights both nights. He knows what Penniston and Halt say. Here is an illustration that he did with John Rackham in England that shows Bustinza on the ground and John going into, or a light coming over him, because John talked with Adrian Bustinza later, after that night of December 28th, and Adrian Bustinza, depicted on the ground here, said, quote, "The lights pushed me to the ground, and I saw the red-orange light on top of you." John knows all the rumors about his jumping on a craft or being taken up in a beam of light and missing time. He still has strange dreams, can't sleep, and feels like something in his mind wants to come out. In 2008, John Burroughs contacted me about his anxieties and said he wondered if I could find some help through hypnosis. We're working on that. Some of you have seen a long program in which we have gone into some work with John. But what I'm going to do now is give you a brief background on him and then introduce my friend and colleague. John Burroughs was born in Bloomington, Illinois in 1960 and joined the U.S. Air Force right after high school graduation. He received orders to go to RAF Bentwaters, England, and arrived in July 1979, about 18 months before the highly strange Rendlesham Forest encounters. John remained in the Air Force until his retirement in 2006 as a tech sergeant. Right from the beginning, John Burroughs and Sergeant Jim Penniston saw what they could not explain, and something happened to their minds, either in the forest, in military interrogations, later on, or both. The results have been blank or confused memories. The two men were right next to each other in the forest, but do not remember the same details. And I now want to introduce my friend, colleague, and the former RAF Bentwaters Airman First Class, John Burroughs, to tell you what he does remember.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Linda Howe, because there's been a lot of different people that have done work on this, but she's continuing to work. And if you want to talk about disclosure, she's given the opportunity today for a lot of people that have never been able to talk about this to come and go on the record. And we're continuing to work on trying to get people that were there that have a story to tell that were never talked to the opportunity to come forward and talk about it. And now Linda's going to ask me some quick questions.
Can you tell them, when you look at this drawing that you did yourself, do you even remember doing this in 2010?
The drawing itself was what I was asked to do by Colonel Hall to give to Colonel Conrad along with my statement. Sergeant Peniston and Airman Kabansek were also asked to do the same thing. The drawing is clearly my drawing, but through the entire time from the very beginning till to this day, I can't give you exactly what we encountered and what we saw. So that was just the best that I could do on what we came up upon.
Could you tell the audience, can you hit that middle space bar? Just hit the space bar and we'll go to the, yeah, here's the computer illustration. Could you explain to the audience what you at least remember consciously was happening in the dynamics of the red and the blue lights?
Well, there was clearly, on both nights that I was out there, there was clearly a white, well, the first night, there was clearly a white light that when we encountered it blinded us. Also on the third night, there was the blue lights, but that is the closest that I could come to when I came up on the object the first night, on what I could remember and what we dealt with. Now, obviously, you can see Sergeant Peniston has a completely different perspective and drawing of what he believes seen. But I will say this, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but from the very beginning, you'll see in the lieutenant's statement and what Jim said, he clearly said it was a metallic type object that we encountered. So no matter what's been said since then, from the very beginning, he felt it was some kind of object.
And when you look at this illustration that John Rackham did with your help, does it bring back any sense of feeling that you had as you and Jim were approaching light?
Well, it clearly, even when John and I were working on this, he even said it looked kind of evil or gave you the feeling of insecurity, or it made you nervous, let's put it to you that way. You didn't like the idea that that's what you had to come upon.
And you and Jim both are still haunted, and you both describe tremendous disorientation, the feeling that there was something wrong in the air, the electrostatic feeling, and yet, once you have done these statements and you've been debriefed by Lieutenant Moran, you go back to rest, and when you wake up, you still want to go out into that forest. Can you describe that?
Yes, and as you heard Jim say too, he felt and I both felt that something, I wouldn't say for a fact was going to come back, but we both had a feeling that whatever happened to us the first time was going to happen again. And I went back up to the base, and that's how I found out about the second night.
Why do you think you were so excited by those lights?
I have no idea. I mean, there was just something that changed in us. I mean, just the effect it gave us and what it wanted us to do. Because I mean, come on, let's talk about this. How many of you would like to meet up with that? I mean, I can't tell you honestly that if I knew something was about to happen and that was what it was going to be, like Doc said, I really wouldn't want to be out there and dealing with that.
Now, can you go to, when you go to see the Desk Sergeant O'Brien, because you are anxious, you feel an excitement that something has returned and you want to get back into that forest, talk about that conversation with O'Brien.
Well, the interesting thing that stuck out to me was the fact that he described that the lieutenant got very shaken up by it and was upset by it. And then what you heard Lori say was that when she heard her and Sergeant Ball out in the woods, again, that she seemed quite excited and upset. So again, to me, it just tells you whatever we encountered had an effect on you and could cause you to have feelings that, you know, that weren't normal and that you didn't feel right.
And it's a fact that Lieutenant Tamplin, the D Flight Shift Commander, lost her gun?
Well, that's something that, I'm sorry? Oh, okay, I understand. Yes, the fact that the Colonel Halt brought up the issue that she may have misplaced her weapon that night, yes.
But she was definitely frightened. And to hear Tremontazzi and to hear Lori Bowen talk about hearing their D flight shift commander so panicked on the radio, and that she apparently was relieved of duty and may have been relieved of duty as D flight shift commander for forever. That's what we're trying to find out.
Right, that's what we're trying to find out right now.
Now, if RAF Bentwaters had nuclear weapons in its weapons storage area, John, where do you think it's likely that the wing command audio tapes, because they were taping everything 24/7 every week around the clock, where would they have gone?
Well, here's the thing. When I first saw the initial report and I heard Captain Verano say what he said, there at no point did and I was out there on 2 different nights, I was out in the Light-All area, did I see any cameras taking movies or taking pictures of it? And this is 1980, it's not today where you carry around a little camera. So I immediately felt that they were the audio tapes, and Colonel Hall had told me that had been done. So obviously, after all this, I'm sure they went over to Ramstein, because I mean that's what Captain Verano said, and I've always stated that if those tapes were ever released, you'd get a very clear understanding what took place over those 3 nights.
Do you think it's likely that they are over in the National Security Agency in Fort Meade?
Well, obviously, if they did an investigation and that's the agency that handles it, that's sure where they are right now.
Now, can you go to what happened in your own life after December 28th? Something really extraordinary happened with you and Vestinza running next to each other, but the very next thing is they assign you to the East Gate.
Yes, when I returned from duty after working Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they had put me on the East Gate. And when I went to work that day, and then I got told where I was going to be posted, which was not a normal posting after 6 o'clock in the evening, I was told I was being put on the East Gate because there was activity going on in the woods, and that if I observed anything, to not call it in on the radio, but to go ahead and call it in on the phone. And the reason why they put me there is because I had already been involved in the incident prior. And when I got out there, there were clearly helicopters out in the area over the forest. There was trucks going up and down the road and then coming out of the forest area. And on the second night, right around darkness, after you'd seen the helicopters out there, I observed a helicopter come up from the forest area out over into the flight line area, carrying what appeared to be some kind of small crate or something, and it was taken over on and put down on the flight line at Woodbridge.
And was that the night that the C-5 came in near WSA?
No, the C-5 actually arrived on Sunday night prior, and then Monday they started out in the woods.
And from your impression, it was that helicopters were out there, there may have been something lifted from the forest, and a C-5 does come in there close to the WSA.
Well, yeah, a C-5 landed at Bentwaters on Sunday night and was parked over by the weapons storage area, yes.
And when you go to Britain's Lord Hill Norton, he was a 5-star admiral, he was chief of the UK Defence Staff, he was chairman of the NATO Military Command, and he said, in his own words about RAF Bentwaters, quote, "It had to be of defense significance," close quote. Why do you think it was able, with him being in the position that he was, and with people who apparently were trying to investigate, how do you think it was so completely and totally covered up for so long?
Well, the thing about the whole incident in itself, and I've discussed this before, is that I don't know how they kept it quiet from the beginning, but somehow for several years they were able to keep this from coming out. The fact that Lord Hill Norton himself, who held one of the highest ranks in the British military, would be equivalent to the Joint Chief of Staffs in the United States, didn't believe that it was not of defense significance. The fact that I was going to open with, I was going to say, what do you think, a lighthouse, planets? I mean, we had something happen to us. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know what it was. And when you go into disclosure, to me, if you're on duty, you've raised your right hand for your country, you've taken an oath, you're out there defending your country, and you have something happen to you, and you've heard from Sergeant Bobo and some other people, there's been a few that said they were brought in and interrogated, which why would we be interrogated if we were doing our job?
And why would he be completely ignored?
And why would the rest of us be ignored? It's clear to me that we weren't taken care of. Okay, and we can go back and forth on who saw what happened, why they saw it this way, why I saw it that way. but you can't deny the fact that over a 3-night period, outside the largest TAC fighter wing in the United States Air Force, they had a weapons storage area, an extraordinary event went on, and to this day, other than one statement that I believe was done at the very beginning when CNN Special Assignments Chuck DeCaro looked into the incident, the only comment by the United States Air Force was, "We stand by Colonel Halt's memo," but they will not make a single official comment on the record about the incident, whether and if you notice, most of the time over the years, the military doesn't hesitate to tell you, like the Phoenix Lights, oh, it was just flares.
And in this case, it was a lighthouse in the wrong direction.
Right. Well, that was what the skeptics say. We
Yeah.
were out there, and according to Colonel Halt, as he's standing there and the beam of light's coming down to his feet and he's going, "This is unreal," he was completely fooled by the lighthouse.
Yes. Now, former UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher told journalist Georgina Bruni, quote, "Yes, Bantwaters happened, but we can't tell the people," close quote, the title of her book. What do you think, just speculating, that Margaret Thatcher and the various need-to-know agencies in the United Kingdom and the United States know about what happened in the Rendlesham Forest that the rest of the world cannot know?
I mean, you have to look at the time frame, what was going on as far as the Cold War, the fact that something, not just once but several times, has happened over the base. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if they really know what happened to us. This is one of the few times to me that I don't spend a lot of time looking at other incidents that no one has been willing to come on the record and say really what happened or didn't happen to us. And they refuse to, discredit us, not the Air Force itself, Department of the Air Force. So maybe they don't even know what happened to us. Maybe it's a mystery to them.
Well, if it is all right with Stephen Bassett, I'll go about another 7 minutes on an event that took place just about 11 days after you. And John, I want to thank you so much for being here and speaking what you do know. And if it is all right with everybody, I'm just going to do a kind of epilogue close because I think this is important. It did not end on December 28th, but nobody knew about what happened on January 9th until one of the airmen named Steve Plume contacted me about 3 years ago. We did one interview, and then he heard about Colonel Halt's statement in June that it was extraterrestrial in origin, and he contacted me again. And for those of you who have been following my work on Coast to Coast, I have done a lot of reports with some of these interviews, and I'm going to continue doing them. And what I want to share with you now is what did happen out in the same Eastgate area after John and the others' experience. We're back in the Rendlesham Forest. It is the East Gate. Here is Steve Plume. He was born in Leominster, Massachusetts on July 14, 1962. Right after high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force on July 10, 1980. He first went to Lackland Air Force Base in Texas for technical training in its police academy, and then he was shipped out to RAF Bantwaters in mid-September 1980. He was still waiting for his secret clearance to come through so he could officially join the base security. In the meantime, he was doing shift reliefs and remembers being in the day room soon after Christmas when airmen talked about other men being chased by UFOs out in the Rendlesham Forest. And then, on the night of January 9 to 10, 1981, U.S. Air Force Airman First Class Steve Plume was on patrol at the RAF Woodbridge East Gate with Senior Airman Wendell Palmer. First, Plume and Palmer watched a light moving up and down in the sky. There have been several cases like this over the last 50, 60 years, and people compare it to a sewing needle. It literally moves this fast. It's covering a great deal, many degrees in the sky, and that's what you're seeing in that drawing that he has done. The men called security control, and to their shock, Colonel Gordon, and this is now what Steve LaPlume says. There's another version of this from Colonel Halt, but I'm giving you Steve LaPlume's. Colonel Gordon Williams, Base Commander Ted Conrad, and Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt all showed up with cameras to photograph the UFO that had returned to Rendlesham Forest, and that Commander Ted Conrad even had his wife and children with him. This is the part that Colonel Halt says happened before, but I'm giving you Steve LaPlume. He said they all came back about 45 minutes later and gave no indication that they saw anything. They posted me on that east gate all night long and told me to report if I saw anything else, and then the higher command, they all left. At the east gate, Airman LaPlume and Palmer saw a blue, green, red, and yellow light come straight for them over Rendlesham Forest that at its closest was a huge cigar-shaped aerial craft, perhaps longer than a football field and 1,000 feet above their heads. And here now is Steve LaPlume.
This craft was maybe about 1,000 feet off the ground, and it just seemed like a huge cigar shape. And when it got over us, I remember seeing some lights underneath. I remember seeing it was a structure, and there was like a square hatch-looking thing. I was pretty sure I was looking at the UFO. And then the craft started moving towards the right, went up in elevation, went up in clouds, and turned into one of the stars, and that was the last we saw of it. Palmer looked at me, and I looked at him, and he said, "Do you want to call that in?" And I said, "Hell no," and he said, "Okay." And we never really talked about it again after that. We never told anybody about it, because we didn't want the ridicule and all the other BS that was going to come down on us.
How long do you think that you and Palmer watched it close above you?
Well, I'd say from the time it took when I realized it wasn't an airplane and it was over the forest to the time it got to where we were standing and over our heads would have taken maybe 20 seconds. And then when it was over our heads, I don't think it was over our heads 10 seconds.
So at least a 30-second sighting, and then what happened to it?
And then it moved off towards our right and went up into the sky slowly, maybe about a 25-degree angle, climbed in elevation, and eventually went from something that looked like a craft to something that looked like a star and faded in with the stars. This was, not of this earth. Nothing that I'd seen could come close to what this craft was doing.
And then what are the implications?
Yep, here we are 30 years later. We still have no clear answers of what's going on. I mean, when you have crafts flying over nuclear weapons storage areas and nobody seems to have a grip on what they are, you'd think that'd be kind of important.
And why did the governments remain so silent?
I think just utter fear that they couldn't. What are they going to tell the people? Something's flying over our nukes and we have no control over it?
And that's probably pretty correct. And in 1997, Jim Peniston gave me permission to share some of his December 26, 1980 Rendlesham Forest experiences in my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness. After his and John Burroughs' encounter with the lights and craft, Sergeant Peniston told me that he received a call to report the first week of February 1981 to the orderly room at the 81st Security Police Squadron at RAF Bentwaters. There, Major Malcolm Zickler ordered Peniston to report to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations for a meeting to tell his story to an AFOSI special agent and a U.S. Air Force major, and Jim says he thought that there was a man there from the United States National Security Agency. Back in 1997, Peniston told me that he deliberately knew that he had not told everyone about the symbols, reaching out, putting his fingers in the engraved, and he had not talked much about what had happened in the interaction with the lights. He thought as long as he said it is only a craft of unknown origin, they would leave him alone. But apparently, the intelligence agents knew Sergeant Peniston was not telling the full truth. Why? He doesn't know. But they gave him a release to sign so that he could be given sodium pentothal. Sodium pentothal is a barbiturate that induces unconsciousness smoothly and rapidly and has been called truth serum when combined with hypnosis. After the Bentwaters sodium pentothal hypnosis session was over, no one told Peniston anything about what he had said, but it lasted at least 3 hours. Finally, 14 years after that, in 1994, Jim Penniston underwent hypnosis on his own with a hypnotherapist to see if he could penetrate more details about these haunting dreams that still drive him crazy to this day. And that he wanted to know what happened during the military sodium pentothal hypnosis that might have done, from his point of view, one of his biggest worries. Did they erase his memory in some way, tamper with his memory, put something in his mind, and this was what drove Jim Penniston to do this hypnosis. I was given an audio cassette of that 1994 session to transcribe, and that transcription is included in my 1998 book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness. Jim Penniston's Bentwaters interrogators ask about the glowing lights and craft that he had earlier up to that point of the question not described to anyone. They're asking me if I see binary code. I see the binary code. They are time travelers. They are us. Hypnotherapist. How far in the future? A long time, very long time. Well, what do they need? Not sure, but it has to do with chromosomes or something like that. How do they get it? They take it. From where? From the other people's bodies. The time travelers were interrupted in Rendlesham Forest. They are having problems. The odds are against them. You touch the symbols and you set off a program? Yes, the craft was repairing itself. All they wanted was a place to stay while it repaired itself. And by touching the symbols, you disrupted the repair program. I activated a binary code. The two government men want to know why. They ask me if I ever had any other encounters with the lights and time travelers before, and I haven't. 1994 hypnotherapist. Are they using us something like breeding stock? No, like Band-Aids. Do they ever take fetuses? If it is task, they do. There are different ships for tasking. The government agents know about this. They know they want to contain the situation. They see that you are requiring damage control. Yes, they see me and John Burroughs, and they're worried about Colonel Holt. They know all about us. What are the intelligence agents going to do with you? They tell me when I was at the East Gate with John, they have 5 different stories to tell. It's important to scramble dates, which confuse and undermine the consistency of eyewitness testimonies, so no credibility can be had with the public and the media. They're going to give me a warning. They tell me that I will hurt the world. It will breach national security and can destroy the system, cause wars, chaos in the streets. That's why it's important to keep it quiet. But it doesn't make any difference if I talk about the story because it's just too unbelievable. Close quote. Perhaps, like human time capsules, John Burroughs, Jim Penniston, Adrian Bustinza, Colonel Holt, and others have embedded within them pieces of truth about an incomprehensible future. Or they contain pieces of lies that keep humans controlled by illusions. Either way, whatever penetrated the Rendlesham Forest in December of 1980 is still reverberating 30 years later with so much power that John Burroughs cannot forget the haunting, seemingly telepathic lights and the question, what is their source? What if the key to the Rendlesham Forest mystery is a tangle of past, present, and future timelines that are in a knot? If the knot is untied by advanced technologies, what happens to past, present, and future? Are we unconsciously in the ultimate paradox? We are they are us. Life on Earth is not guaranteed but the mysterious telepathic lights and their makers are using us to survive. And does our ignorance of them and the timeline not allow the manipulation of us by the time travelers? If we humans became conscious of the time manipulation efforts, would our consciousness change the future to survival or to extinction? Does the UFO phenomenon keep us dumb and blind to prevent our interference in their efforts to unravel past, present, and future? I leave you with that question among a million questions, and hope that I can keep, with John's help and others, reporting as we keep going deeper and deeper in what I think could end up being a leverage point for a much bigger truth in this revolution as we are heading deeper and deeper into the 21st century. It's been a privilege to be here today, and I thank you very, very much, and I thank John Burroughs. Thank you.